The India of Narendra Modi today is not the India I fell in love with. And his government's failure to uphold the freedoms so pivotal to a democracy's survival, freedom of expression, freedom of the press, and of course, freedom of religion, are the reason why. Given the topic at hand today, I'll focus on freedom of religion. The United States Commission on International Religious Freedom released a chilling report this year describing what it called, quote, Hindu nationalist policies resulting in systemic, ongoing, and egregious violations of religious freedom. The report describes attacks on religious freedom in India that occurred throughout 2020, from disinformation about the COVID-19 pandemic that targeted religious minorities, to attempts to ban interfaith marriages, to riots in Delhi, where more than 50 people died and 200 were injured, most of them Muslims. The report called this, and I'm quoting again, the worst Hindu-Muslim mob violence in more than 3 decades, in which mobs supportive of Hindu nationalism, quoting again, operated with impunity, using brutal force to single out Muslims, attack mosques, and destroy homes and businesses in majority Muslim neighborhoods. All of these examples are deeply upsetting, but perhaps what is most alarming about this report to me is the fact that these attacks are not new. They're part of a pattern we've seen becoming increasingly clear and prevalent under Prime Minister Modi.
Over the last several years, I've connected with many Indian Americans in my district and learned about the injustices. Throughout my candidacy and certainly throughout my first 6 months in office, I've been very clear about human rights and what's happening in marginalized communities here in America, but in Palestine, China, Yemen, India, across the globe. We must speak out about these horrifying events. Unfortunately, in recent years, India is facing the same right-wing fascism that attempted to destroy our own democracy not that long ago. I believe that this is happening frequently and more frequently than we can imagine throughout our nation and other nations. I believe this ultra-nationalism and this very supremacist ideology are the greatest threats to our national security. In the last 7 years, hundreds of Muslims just walking down the street have been attacked by vigilante mobs. They've been lynched. It is a travesty of justice, and I'm horrified by it. Religious minorities, social and political activists, lawyers, journalists, and even students are attacked all the time. The worst brunt of the government's persecution is being faced by India's 200 million Muslims, who now face statelessness thanks to this horrible National Register for Citizens, or the NRC as it's called. I can't get over it. I didn't think I'd see this in my lifetime, but we are. Across India, but especially in the northern state of Uttar Pradesh, Muslims have been subjected to killings alarming even the United Nations officials who wrote to the Uttar Pradesh government about these killings. Amnesty International has documented the violence against Muslims, whether from the police in response to the protests against the citizenship law, or in the Indian capital of New Delhi last year by rioting mobs who were allegedly part of Hindu nationalists. Thousands of Muslims who protested the citizenship law, as well as those who lost family members and property in the violence against them, continue to be in prison. Our own report from the United States Department, released by Secretary Blinken in 2020, speaks at length about the persecution of India's Muslims and Christians. The report said, and I quote, "There were reports of religiously motivated killings, assaults, riots, discrimination, vandalism, and actions restricting the right of individuals to practice and speak about their religious beliefs." The report further states that Muslim academics, human rights activists, former police officers, and journalists allege anti-Muslim bias in the investigation in relation to Delhi. India is the world's second most populated country with over 1.3 billion people. Religious persecution, violation of human rights, curbs on civil and political rights are going to make India less secure, not more. I assure you. India's equity and standing in the eyes of the world are severely damaged already. Freedom House has downgraded its rating for India's democracy from being free to partly free. That's heartbreaking. Persecution of entire sections of society, especially when backed by governments, is a recipe for a future filled with disaster. We must do better. We must pressure both our adversaries and our allies to support human rights around the world for the sake of a cohesive existence and sustainable peace across the globe. Hate anywhere is unacceptable.
Religious freedom is a core principle upon which the United States was founded, a key tenet of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And today, protection for religious freedom now form the cornerstone of democracies worldwide. Unfortunately, we are seeing increasing numbers of governments restrict rather than protect religious freedom in their laws and actions around the entire globe. For many minority groups around the world, religious persecution is an urgent concern, not an artifact of history. Laws that criminalize the rejection, abandonment, or speech critical of certain beliefs are harmful restraints on religious freedom and human rights. India has long had an admirable commitment to pluralism. It is the world's largest democracy, whose bonds with the American people continue to grow. But the United States is right to speak up and speak out when a fellow democracy and strategic partner fails to protect the rights of all their people. That is why I remain seriously concerned about the Indian government's commitment to protecting the rights of minorities, including the 200 million Muslims in India, the government's targeting of social and political activities, and crackdown on free speech, and their religiously motivated discrimination against minorities cannot be viewed in isolation, as escalating nationalism threatens to undermine India's long-standing oath to democratic values.